Imagine a world cloaked in mystery, where the edges of the map simply trailed off into the unknown, filled with tales of dog-headed men and lands where the sun never set. Now, picture a young Venetian merchant, barely a man, stepping into this world, not just to its edge but plunging headfirst into its heart. This isn't a fantasy novel. It's the real-life saga of Marco Polo. His journey wasn't just a trip. It was a 24-year odyssey that would shatter Europe's understanding of the world. He walked through deserts that whispered ancient secrets, stood in the court of the most powerful ruler on earth, and saw wonders that his contemporaries could only dream of. His story, written down in a Genoese prison, would become one of the most famous and controversial books in history, inspiring dreamers and explorers for centuries to come, including a certain Christopher Columbus. But who was the man behind the legend? Was he a brilliant observer, a masterful storyteller, or the world's greatest liar? Let's unravel the silk threads of his incredible journey. Marco Polo was born in 1254 into a family of merchants in the bustling, powerful Republic of Venice. Think of Venice then not just as a city of canals, but as the Silicon Valley of its time, a hub of commerce, innovation, and global ambition. His father, Niccolo, and his uncle, Maffeo, were no strangers to long-distance trade. Before Marco was even born, they had already ventured deep into the east, reaching the court of the great Kublai Khan, grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan. Imagine their return to Venice after years away, finding Niccolo's wife had passed away and left him a 15-year-old son he'd never met. This reunion would change the course of Marco's life, and in turn, history itself. In 1271, the Polos set out again, but this time the 17-year-old Marco was with them. This was no gap-year trip. It was a perilous, 3.5-year trek across hostile terrains. They traveled the Silk Road, a network of trade routes that was the lifeblood of continents. They traversed the treacherous mountains of Persia, the unforgiving sands of the Gobi Desert, and landscapes that few Westerners had ever laid eyes on. Marco wasn't just a passenger. He was a keen-eyed apprentice, absorbing languages, cultures, and the intricate details of trade and geography. He was learning how the world worked, one dusty mile at a time. The physical toll was immense, but the knowledge he was gathering was priceless. He was seeing firsthand the empires and civilizations that were, to most Europeans, little more than myths. Finally, they arrived at Chengdu, the legendary summer palace of Kublai Khan, later known to the West as Xanadu. Picture the scene: 3 weary Venetians, dusty from the road, standing before the most powerful man in the world. Kublai Khan ruled over a vast empire stretching from the Pacific to the Black Sea. He was immensely curious about the West, and was immediately impressed by the young Marco's intelligence and linguistic skills. Instead of just sending them on their way, the Khan did something extraordinary. He took Marco into his service. For the next 17 years, Marco Polo wasn't just a guest. He was an emissary of the great Khan. He traveled all over China and beyond, on missions for the emperor. He witnessed the use of paper money, coal for fuel, and a sophisticated postal system, all innovations centuries ahead of Europe. He observed the grand cities, the bustling markets, and the intricate workings of the Yuan dynasty. He saw things that were simply unbelievable to a medieval European, from crocodiles he called giant serpents, to the organized, sprawling cityscapes that dwarfed anything back home. After 17 years in the Khan's service, the Polos grew homesick. But leaving wasn't easy. The Khan had grown fond of them and was reluctant to let them go. Their chance came when they were tasked with one final mission: to escort a Mongol princess, Kokachin, to Persia to be married. This time they would travel by sea. It was a perilous 2-year voyage through the South China Sea, across the Indian Ocean, facing pirates, storms, and disease. Of the 600 people who set out, only a handful, including the Polos, survived to reach Persia. From there, they finally made their way back to Venice in 1295. They had been gone for 24 years. When they arrived, dressed in worn Tatar clothes, no one recognized them. Legend has it that to prove their identity, they cut open the seams of their garments, and a river of rubies, emeralds, and diamonds cascaded out, the fortune they had amassed in the East. But the story doesn't end there. A few years later, Venice was at war with its rival Genoa. Marco, commanding a ship, was captured and thrown into a Genoese prison. It was here, in this dark, unlikely place, that history was truly made. He shared a cell with a writer of romances named Rustichello da Pisa. To pass the time, Marco dictated the story of his incredible travels. Rustichello wrote it all down, embellishing it with the flair of a fiction writer, creating The Travels of Marco Polo. The book was an instant sensation. Before the printing press, it was copied by hand, translated into numerous languages, and spread across Europe like wildfire. It was the first detailed look into the mysterious East, but many found his tales too fantastic to be true. A book filled with millions of things, earning him the nickname Il Milione, the man of a million lies. Did he really see everything he claimed? Some historians point out he never mentioned the Great Wall or chopsticks. Was he exaggerating or simply recounting what he was told? The debate continues to this day, but the impact of his book is undeniable. It painted a picture of a world far larger, richer, and more complex than medieval Europe could have imagined. It inspired generations of explorers, mapmakers, and dreamers. Christopher Columbus himself owned a heavily annotated copy, fueling his own quest to find a westward route to the riches Marco had described. On his deathbed, Marco Polo was allegedly urged by his family to retract the fables in his book. His reported response was legendary. "I have not told half of what I saw." Liar or visionary, Marco Polo cracked open the door between East and West, and the world was never the same again. His journey reminds us that the greatest discoveries are often found at the very edge of belief. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you never miss another adventure into history. See you next time.